I wanted to do, I cover the following presidents and wise guys in the White House: FDR, Truman, Kennedy, LBJ, Nixon, Reagan, Trump, and Biden. And a lot of what I was looking to do with the JFK chapter is deal with mythology. And yes, he got help in 1960. Yes, the mob played a role in trying to kill Castro. But the mythology has JFK stuffing briefcases full of cash, giving them to Judith Exner and taking them to their mutual girlfriend. Judith Exner taking it to Sam Giancana. That never happened. But what did happen is Joe Kennedy reached out to Meyer Lansky's partner, Jimmy Alo. And Jimmy Alo's family, I mean, I've known his family for years and talked to them. And he lived, I mean, he only died in 2001. I mean, he lived to be almost 100. And Jimmy Alo said, look, we don't want to, I don't want to get involved with fixing elections. We just got thrown out of Cuba. We're licking our wounds. I don't want to. We're exhausted. We're going elsewhere. But you should talk to Sinatra. And Joe Kennedy knew Jimmy Alo from South Florida, and racetracks and illegal gambling places where Joe Kennedy went. And Joe Kennedy reached out to Sinatra, who introduced them to the Chicago outfit. Chicago outfit was not universally thrilled about the idea because the Kennedys had been going after them in Congress with the McClellan hearings. But they said, "All right, well, we'll see what we can do with and get labor support," and they did. They got him labor support, and their logic was, even though we don't trust them, maybe number one, they'll go lighter on us because we're getting to the father. Number two, maybe we'll get something on them. And what's interesting is that the Kennedys were not one unit. Jack and Bobby were not involved with these efforts because they were rich kids. They didn't have to be. Joe did it. And I think that there's no question that the mob helped get votes for Kennedy with labor. But whether or not they turned the election for Kennedy is a big question mark. I mean, we could debate that till the end of the world. I will not in the book litigate the Kennedy assassination because I'm sick of it. And the things that people believe are true are not true. But the argument I make in the book is the Kennedy assassination is not a historical event. It is a religion. It is a religion. And the idea, if to believe that the mafia did it, is to misread their power in this country. They were very powerful, but they always knew where their power was and their power wasn't. And I show wiretaps. The FBI had the mafia totally wired up, illegally, by the way, at that time. They didn't have a thing about the Kennedy assassination. If anything, they got mobsters being terrified that they were going to be blamed. And you have mob bosses saying, my God, do you know what they did to us when one of our guys roughed up an FBI agent? They were terrified of it. I spoke to the son of a major mob figure who said that when his father beat the feds in the case, the FBI and local cops would pull the kids aside and suddenly heroin would be in their car, and then say to the father, well, we'll make this go away now, but you're leaving the country. And some of them had to set up business abroad. If the mob had anything to do with killing Kennedy, the government would have rained hellfire down on them that is beyond anything that you can imagine, because would have been a point of honor. It would have been emasculating to kill the president. And the guy who started the rumor that the mob killed Kennedy with Marcello was a guy I've known for years. He's long gone, and he was notorious for making stuff up and putting himself in the center of it. But my feeling is, if you want to spend your life on the Kennedy assassination and how the mob and the CIA got together and did it. You do that, I'm going to go play with my grandson.
Yeah,
But
there.
I think to understand, and a lot of what I talk about in the book is the power that the mob did have and the power that they did not have. And one of the things that was interesting to me about Joe Kennedy is the desire to believe he was a bootlegger. He wasn't. What Joe Kennedy did and what made him so Trump-like and so brilliant is he knew how to do things in a way that were provably legal, or at least not provably illegal. There, if for Joe Kennedy to have been a bootlegger would have been like Warren Buffett deciding to become a drug dealer. He was making money legally, including on insider trading, which was legal. And I get into a lot of that. Well, what happened with Biden is when he was running for Senate in 1972, he was behind. He was going against a very popular incumbent, and the incumbent decided he had to go scorched earth on Biden, and he put together a print ad campaign that would have really taken apart Biden at the joints. Frank Sheeran and the Teamsters did is they made sure none of those newspapers in Delaware were picked up and delivered by the Teamsters. And so that is how Biden benefited from the mob. Do we have any evidence that Biden knew? No, but that is not how it works. I mean, if people are expecting that gangsters are sneaking in to the Oval Office calling shots, they're not. But Biden was the beneficiary of that in the same way that Kennedy was the beneficiary of labor support in 1960.
So, and then within Reagan and Lou Wasserman, I know who Lou Wasserman is. Would you educate the viewer who doesn't have an appreciation for just how powerful this guy was?
Well, Lou Wasserman was the head of MCA, which we now call Universal, and he started out as a talent agent. He came from he ran mob. He was a publicist at the beginning of his career for mob casinos in Cleveland, and he ended up starting as a talent agent. He saved Ronald Reagan's career when Reagan's acting career was going down. He got Reagan a job as the host of what was called General Electric Theater, which was a very popular TV show. This is what introduced Reagan to the American public through television. And Reagan became president of the Screen Actors Guild and famously gave Lou Wasserman what was called a waiver. And the waiver allowed MCA to remain a talent agency, but also engage in television production, which none of their competitors, agents or TV, or producers were able to do. It gave MCA an obscene advantage. Lou Wasserman built MCA with the help of the Chicago outfit's muscle. And it wasn't that the Chicago outfit was extorting him. It was that Sidney Korshak, the outfit's lawyer, and Korshak were best friends, and they were very much partners. So by employing Korshak in the Chicago outfit, he had an insurance policy that the other studios did not necessarily have. So you make sure the Chicago outfit get some money and you're not going to have labor problems. It's worth paying them. So Lou Wasserman had a lot of contacts in that world, and it was found in the 1980s. The Gambinos, there was a Gambino capo working out of MCA headquarters. Now, why this is relevant to Reagan is Lou Wasserman saved Reagan's career, but one of the things I talk about in the book is Reagan went after the mafia very, very hard as president. It led to what was called the Commission trial in 1986. But you know who wasn't roughed up? Sidney Korshak and Lou Wasserman's crowd. And I talked to former prosecutors who, told me they believe that Reagan had the Justice Department pull their punches on Wasserman and his friends. And that is where we get to wise guys in the White House and the links between the presidency and the mob. Well, let me be very specific of why Cohn was so beneficial to Trump. Uh, Number one, he was the author of the scorched earth style, which was Trump would just sue everybody. And Roy Cohn's genius was not legal genius, it was fear. It's that most of us in everyday life, our morality goes from here to here. Roy Cohn's was he was willing to go here and here. And that's very scary. And by the way, that's what the mob does. I mean, the mob, you always hear, well, they're tough. It's not that they're tough. It's just that, Jake, you and I, we are simply, if somebody does something to us, you know, and I know, we might get furious. We're not going to kill them. These guys have a will, and that is their power. And so that was number one, why Cohn was beneficial to Trump. Number two, Trump n- wanted legitimacy. He wanted respectability. He can't sit down with mobsters and directly negotiate with them if he wants to be the, at the top of society, which is very much what he wanted. He doesn't want now. What he more likes to do is to offend the society that rejected him by using, and I talk about this in the book, the cover of privilege. He is able to do things that you can't without it. If I'm meeting with my lawyer, at least theoretically, that is a privileged conversation, although that privilege can be pierced. If Roy Cohn is dealing with what was called the Concrete Club, which were the people who controlled concrete, which was the Colombos, the Genovese, and Gambinos primarily. Trump can't help it if he goes to Roy Cohn's office and Fat Tony Salerno happens to be there. And what? They're not going to talk and say hello. And a prosecutor friend of mine saying, yeah, but Eric, that's not really privileged if they're not legitimately having a legal conversation. And my response was, it's 45 years ago and nobody's proven anything. It worked. So, regardless of how you feel about Trump, when he says, what I did makes me smart, he's right. And doesn't mean you should approve, doesn't mean it's moral, but it worked. And this stuff Trump does works. And the argument I make in the book was Trump would not have been able to be as successful a developer without mafia help. But even though the mafia was prosecuted for some of the things it did, Trump wasn't. I wanted to demystify the relationship between the presidency and the mob and argue that the mafia has been a gear in the engine of presidential politics from at least Roosevelt. However, being a gear in the engine doesn't mean they were physically walking into the Situation Room at 3 in the morning and cutting deals. That's not how it works.